Hello, Globe Docs fam. I'm Janae Osterheld, Boston Globe culture columnist and troublemaker, founder of A Beautiful Resistance. And I am so lucky to be in community today with director Noah Christopher and Gregory Ball, who is the director of production and digital strategy for Embrace. We call him G or Big T, OG. Today we are discussing welcoming the Embrace and the historic monument and movement that is here in Boston. Hello, beautiful people.
What's going on? What's going on?
You said beautiful people. I didn't know if you were talking to me quite yet.
Oh
Yeah,
my gosh, here he goes, right?
you know,
Here
here
he
he's
goes.
trying to get me to gas
No,
beautiful woman,
absolutely
beautiful
not.
Yes,
soul.
Absolutely
yes,
not.
he's fishing for compliments.
No, I listen. I know I'm beautiful. I just didn't know whether she knew it or not.
Oh.
I know, I know. I mean, Black people are beautiful. Um, so I want to first ground us in joy. So, what is giving you both joy this season?
Hmm. I
I
think.
okay, you go
Oh, go ahead.
first.
Go ahead. Go
No,
ahead.
B before C. B before C. Go ahead.
Okay. I'm feeling joyful about the work that we have done and that we're doing in the future. Like, I've been very fortunate during the time that I've been at Embrace that um as an organization, we're just approaching our work in a completely different way. Um, and that is actually the genesis of the relationship that we have with Noah and Beyond Measure is the idea of using storytelling as a part of the changing the narrative around racial equity. And this film is a piece of that. So for me, the joy of what we've done in the past and being connected to that, and we have a few things that we're working on for the future. So I'm super excited about that. That creativity, the ability to kind of build with other creative people. Noah and I are texting on a regular basis, and he's gotten used to me like, hey, what if we do this? And he's like, oh yeah, I guess we could do that. And it comes back with an incredible idea. So he's been an incredible partner in that. So that's what's bringing me joy.
For myself, I'd say just being able to provide, being able to be creative and provide, um, and then opportunities, being able to have opportunities coming up that are creative, and also the opportunities that happened in the past and seeing where those can take us moving forward is a blessing. I think anything that you create is not officially done until you decide to move on to your next project. So I'm excited to see what comes from it. It's given me joy. Again, my health, my family's giving me joy. So I can't complain. I can't complain. What about yourself, Janae?
Um, well, A Beautiful Resistance is finally about to, publish season 3, which has
Mhm.
been on hold for a little bit. So I'm very excited, and that's giving me joy because, as you both already stated, creativity is essential, and how we tell our stories is how we shift narratives and claim our truth and claim space. That being said, uh, Noah, what inspired you and drew you
Hmm.
to want to make this film? Because it's one thing to be hired to do a job. I do a job every day, but
Yep.
there's very specific stories that call to me that I'm like,
Right.
it feels different when you're doing the work.
Right.
So,
Yeah, this story, I felt like, and we put in the tagline of the poster, the untold love story of Boston. And I think it's because it's a story that, and there's many stories. It's one story of the Kings, but if you look at just the Black story in Boston itself, that's a love story that hasn't been told or hasn't been told correctly. And I think there were so many openings here for us to delve into what that Black journey is and where it came from, and then also how it's misinterpreted in media. Right, when you first watch the film, the first thing you see, that first like minute to 30 seconds, is what everyone sees in Hollywood of Boston. You got, the drums, you got the green tint over Boston areas, and a very, white driven perspective. But that is trumped by everything after that in the film, of who's here, what's been moved, what movement's been done, where's it going in the future. So for me, I was drawn by the fact of this seems like, as you guys, and this is a shameless plug, the trouble, the trouble that you can start, the good trouble that you can start. And this was one of those opportunities. And then to work with Embrace on this, because they're, making so many different moves. And then the trust that they have in me and my company as artists and creatives, being able to tell the story the way we would like to. um, it was just like a layup. It was just like, I have to be a part of this. And for me, I'm a narrative filmmaker, so I like doing films. But my team was like, yo, we have to get on this project because I think we can tell a story here. There is a story obviously here. And we were really excited about jumping in and getting involved.
Greg, something that Noah just said is so important to me, and that's like beyond the Kings and their love story. This is also about the Boston love story and what it means to be um, Black and love yourself and love each other in Boston. Can you talk a little bit about the importance of kind of telling that story and showing that story?
Yeah, that is kind of the core of the monument itself. It's really rooted in love, and there were so many kind of deliberate pieces that I think, quite honestly, got overshadowed as we did it. So it was really important for the film to kind of lift those things up, like for example, the plaza that has the 65 names of the Freedom Plaza. Those are people who Dr. and Mrs. King, who did the work, some of whom are still with us today. And one of my favorite things is when I've gone to the monument or to the memorial, and I've seen those folks see their names with their families, like the day that we did the unveiling, and like generations were seeing that, and it was beautiful. And that's really the core of this work, is really telling those stories to show that love. And then with Boston's one of the cities that defines America in my eyes. It's us, it's New York City, it's Philadelphia. There's many cities that kind of tell the story of America to the world. And that's what drives people when they come here. So why not tell the story of, Black love right in the middle of the city? You know what I mean? That's where it deserves to be. And then also the connection of the space to the Kings. Like, they've had dates when they were students there. So students here rather, it just made sense for it all to be connected. And it was illuminating the stories of Black Bostonians and people that were connected and doing the work. And then also the story of the Kings. There's kids who come from all over the country, all over the world, to get educated and get their first experience in the world right here in the city. And they essentially were that when they connected, when they were here. So that is a story that deserves to be told. And then, as Noah was saying, there's this misnomer, this misunderstanding about who we really are. We are more than a town. We're more than Ben Affleck in movies and all those things. So it's important to take control of that narrative and show that Black love.
And it's funny. Oh, I'm sorry. And it's funny. A lot of my friends had no idea Martin was here. No idea.
Well, I mean, a lot of
Exactly.
people, period. It's not just
Yeah, right.
Boston has been very intentional historically about its complicity in a narrative of whiteness. Like, I say it all the time, and people are probably tired of it. This is not a white city. It was a white city. It's a city that's complicit in the narratives of whiteness and happy to uplift white supremacy. And in that erasure, people don't know the rich history is here unless they do come across a Dart Adams in their life. So they don't know those things. Which is why I do the work I do. It's why all of you do the work you do. But I do want to take a beat and talk about the overshadowing, not just by power structures and white narratives, but what happened, at the unveiling of the Embrace was so beautiful. I remember that day. I will always remember that day. Being there was gorgeous and it was beautiful. And then what happened after was ugly. And, our people were part of it. This was not a case where we could point to other communities. This was a case where it was like our people were actively disparaging, and a lot of outside of Boston people actively disparaging this very beautiful monument. And part of it is because of ignorance. Like, so many of them were making judgments based on pictures without even doing the research or the history or knowing that the Kings were here, without knowing any of who was involved in all the talks that were had with the community. So let's talk a little bit about kind of what it means to broach that and face that. And, when people are so used to seeing war and seeing violence, it's almost like they don't have any type of healthy response to a pure intentional act of love and claiming of space.
Yeah, I think that for me, so that was a for real, it was a very difficult time, like post unveiling for us as an organization. And it was difficult in the sense that we're getting this reaction from the very people who were really centered in the thinking of the creation of the monument. But one of the things that I kind of came to grips with was, one, it was almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy. Like, our reputation preceded ourselves. So there was an automatic assumption around a lot of things around the monument. First thing was the depiction of Hank's work with it, of Hank Willis Thomas's work with it being their arms, right? So one, why do we automatically always have to have the same depiction of art in the same way? So if there's a guy on a horse, then when we do our monument, we want it to be, Dr. and Mrs. King sitting on a bench. Like, it has to be like a full depiction of who they are in order for it to be relevant. I don't think that's true. And then here's another piece. I literally had this conversation 2 days ago with somebody who was a very, very loud objector to the project. And I explained to them, I was like, that it was never supposed to be a depiction of the Kings in full. In fact, this Hank's piece is the only piece that had a direct correlation of any direct correlation to the Kings. There was one version that was an altar. There was one version that was a pool, and there was a bridge. Like, they were all meant to be an abstract. His was the only one that had any connection to their physical being. And they're like, "Oh, wow, really? If that's the case, really? Was that the case?" Yes, that was the case. You should tell people that. You mean all the times that we were in the newspaper over the last year and a half?
That's what I was about to say. I like all the times the Globe published those pictures and all the pictures of all the various
yes.
pictures.
And the voting process, the voting picture, the depictions of all those different projects, or those potential projects, were in every one of the voting places. So when I think about, it actually really kind of inspired me in a strange way afterwards, because I'm like, okay, this just shows where our problem is the dissemination of information. Because if you had asked me the day before if we did a good job in terms of letting people know about the project, I'm like, yeah, I would have felt comfortable in saying yes. But there are people who did not see it until it was on the Shade Room. They live in this city and did not see it or understand it, know anything about it until it was in the Shade Room. So go ahead.
I don't know. I have to rebut here, because part of this, as someone who witnessed it and reported it and is not a part of Embrace, but just, loves it, supports the mission, I can honestly say that it was communicated. And at some point it was over communicated. Like, everybody was covering it. TV stations, national TV stations, the Globe, the New York Times, this was covered at length. It was talked about in churches. It was talked about in neighborhood meetings over the course of years. So if you didn't know, now the outsiders who aren't from our area, that's different. But in Boston, the people who have complained, if you did not know, it's because you willfully are not taking part in the process of engaging in the community beyond your bubble. And I think that's, I don't want to get too far off topic if we're talking about the film, but I will say part of what it means to embrace is to engage.
Mm.
And, it's like people like to opt out of politics and processes. They're like, oh, no, I'm not political. I don't want to do politics. But it's like going to the grocery store is political, because it's like,
Mm.
if there's not a grocery store in your neighborhood and there's a desert, then you need to participate in the process. Public art is a process. Like,
Mm.
we cannot continue to be people, especially Black people, in a community like ours that is so rich with the diaspora and people coming from all over the world with Black identities, to opt out of knowing, and learning and engaging. And I don't want to blame people, but I'm just saying part of it has to be, if everyone
Mm.
is offering the information and actively going in the community, because they were actively going in the community, going to churches, going to neighborhood meetings. So it's like, if you're not going to your neighborhood meeting, if you're not popping up at the library, I'm not saying you got to go to church, because I don't want to get into people's faith, but I'm just saying, if you're not coming to those things that are actually in your neighborhood, if y'all didn't go to people's neighborhoods, I would say yes. But y'all actually were in people's neighborhoods.
I also
I'm,
think I also think
good.
uh, what Hank said was true, is that when you're in that space of being at the Embrace, it's different than seeing it in a photograph. It's totally different, right? He wanted that engagement for you to go there, to look up, to walk around it, to really get a 360 experience of that piece of art, where an angle or a photo, yes, anything could be or come off the wrong way, right? Depending on how you want to shoot it, depending on where your mind is. But to be there is totally different from seeing it. And I remember when we had at one of the festivals a comment about the structure and saying, "Wow, all of that." But then when that same person, I won't name drop, went to visit it, they sent a message back, a long message,
Mm-hmm.
apologizing, saying, "I understand now. I get it. I see people there embracing." So you got to go there. Number one is, I think it was intentional that he made it more of a 360 experience rather than just an image for you to
Yeah, and
Well,
look
I agree with you on that. And not to just to beat this whole piece up, but I think, the one thing where I say that we do have to do a better job, and not necessarily embrace, just in general, we have to understand where people are in some cases and take that extra effort, because it is ultimately to our own detriment if we're not communicating in all the ways we can. So for us, and particularly in my role in Embrace, it's like, okay, what are some of the other ways that we can get messages out? What are the ways that we really can truly engage so that this doesn't happen again? But there was so many false narratives going around. It was the thought that, and like I said, it plays into what we were originally saying about the complicit nature of how the story of Boston is told. Um, it was, people believed it was this faceless group of white folks that just swooped down and dropped this thing in the middle of the park.
it
That
was it was a lot of false narratives, and I was confused because, again, the story was told and told and told, and it
at.
wasn't just told in digital media, in print, on TV. It was told on Instagram. It was told on TikTok. Like, it was actually very much on every platform available, which is why I have a hard time being like, wondering how much more could you do, because I was on the radio. It was like
yeah.
Media
outside
outlet.
every media outlet, every media form. I saw it on
Mm.
TikTok. I saw it on Instagram. So I think sometimes I get so flustered thinking about, what more can you do if people don't meet you halfway or like plug into the space.
But it's art too. It's art though, right? Everyone has their own opinion of art, and this is
Oh
not like,
yeah, art's always,
art's always gonna
but
have that.
and I want to get back to the film, but one more thing I
Yep,
want to say about the
yep. No, go ahead.
360 nature of it is, I do want to take the same way Greg was like, maybe we got to think about what we can do more. Something that I actually said at the Globe to my editor was like, who is choosing all these pictures? Because
Mm.
it's a choice to not
It
show
is.
it. It is a choice. Photo editors across the nation made a choice. And I was like, you made a choice not to show it from the heart angle. You made a choice to show it up top, which is not even a human angle. That's not a human eye angle. That is not ever how the human eye will digest that, because that's not even how we look at it. Like it's impossible for the human eye to look at it up top. So, you know, I think it's really important that media outlets think about how they choose photos and why they chose it that way, because I don't feel like they would have chose the man on the horse to show it from the top that way. They would have showed it face on in a more aesthetically pleasing way. And I also think it's important, because I did say folks got to start being more civically engaged. I want to also take a second and say sometimes our reaction is so defensive and in the perspective negative gaze, because it's all we've ever been given. So even if we read that it's positive, historically, we've had to endure so much pain that you almost have to fight out of the negative to believe that something is intentional and positive. So I just wanted to hold some space for that, because I feel like I came on real hard.
No,
But
you're right. You're right on time. You're absolutely right on time.
back to the film, one of the things I love most about the film is how much space was held for the Black Boston story, and how intentionally nuanced it was, as far as, like, you know, Black culture in Boston is very different from Black culture anywhere else in this country, because it is the sound of the, you know, the Caribbean. It's the sound of Cape Verde. It's very different. It's also hip hop. It's also, you know, the Black South. And you did such a beautiful, intentional job around showing that. You talk a little bit about why it was so necessary to kind of show us in our multitudes.
Yeah, I think like you said, in Boston, there is not one Black narrative. There's so many different ways in which Black Boston has been created here. And it's important to show that because, again, control your own narrative, right? There's tons of stories that, honestly, the film was actually like an hour and a half. It was so long, and then we came back and they were like, "Yeah, they're not going to give you an hour and a half on NBC to air this." So we were like, "Okay, we're gonna go back. Let's try to get it under 45." But it could have been an hour and a half of all of these different stories of people coming from the Caribbean, like you mentioned, and different African diasporas. But I thought it was important to show that because this is what makes Boston what it is. It's not just one thing. There's so many different levels, and depending on who you are and what your interests are, as a Black person, you can find that outlet in the city. Um, whether it be Caribbean, whether it be hip hop, like you're saying, underground hip hop. I almost went through that whole journey myself living in Boston, starting with the underground hip hop, then moving more towards Caribbean, finding out where my ancestry came from, St. Kitts, how they got here. So just delving into that and showing that, and also trying to uh, audibly show that, sense that as well in the film with the music choices, right? When it talks about Black Boston, we try to give a little bit of Caribbean sound in the background. And also when we go talk about South End, obviously you have that jazz, right? So we wanted to have people feel like they were in that moment during the time with what they were seeing on screen.
G, can you talk a little bit, because, you know, I do want people to continuously be informed about Embrace. And can you talk a little bit about how it is not just a monument? There is an entire movement. There is a mission that is ongoing, because that is something that people still don't know. I mean, the number of people that were like, "Oh, a monument's nice, but you know, this money could go here and here and there." And I'm like, do you even know what Embrace is doing? So can you talk a little bit about all of the work you're doing in different directions that Embrace is going?
Absolutely. And it's interesting you say that quote that way, because that was actually one of the very first conversations when our founders went out and started talking to community. You know, one of the things they said is, hey, this monument is an incredible idea. You're going to do it for Dr. King and Mrs. King, but what about after that? So, and that is really kind of where Imari, as our executive director, like that's where he came in and kind of filled in a lot of the blanks to be able to do that, so that it wasn't just about creating this one piece and it was about ongoing work. So as an organization, what we do is we really center, you know, we really center the conversations around racial equity at the cross section of research, policy, and arts and culture. So that's why doing things like the film is just an essential part of our work. Doing things like our Embrace Festival is a part of our work. Doing our block party, and even the way that when we did the gala, that was even when we're having a good time, it's intentional about how we're doing that. It's about bringing all of those elements together. You know, a lot of times, you know, when we have conversations around DEI and those things, it's really about inviting folks of color into a white space. And we're very intentional about like, okay, well, we're gonna throw the party at our house and y'all come and party with us our way. So that's why we made it a sneaker ball. That's why we had Jazzy Jeff as our headliner, though, you know, while we had Soulaholics as part of our gala. And those things extend into the other parts of our work. So, you know, we do have a research and policy part of what we're doing to really kind of create the roadmap for some of the changes that we're trying to execute. We have the arts and culture piece because we know arts and culture is really where the story gets told. The reason why the powerful part at the beginning of the film was that piece where it was those clips of what the stereotypical Boston part is. Well, part of that is in the way the story of Black people in America and Black or people in America totally gets told is through pop culture. It's through art. And that's why everybody thinks Cheers. That's why everybody thinks, you know, Ben and Matt Damon. Yeah, The Town. That's why, because we haven't had those opportunities to kind of tell those stories. And granted, we did it this time with a documentary, but there's going to be places where we're going to be moving into narrative work as well. You know, we have our podcast that I host that you've been fortunate enough to bless me as a guest and be on our show. I should say I was.
Yeah, I was gonna say you were fortunate.
Oh, I was gonna take it. I was just so lucky.
I was on a roll. But yeah, it's really being active and engaging in those places because, you know, traditionally a lot of organizations, and I think this is a thing that people are used to. They hear the amount of money that we raise to be able to create the monument and things like that, and they think, you know, direct service. You know, why didn't they, you know, we could have, you know, you can go out and give out turkeys in the hood and all that kind of stuff, and then everybody feels good and it looks great, and you got great pictures of people volunteering and giving out backpacks or whatever. But, you know, what are those long-term ways that you can change systemic racism? You know, part of it is the stories that you choose to tell. You know, there was a lot of back and forth around where we put the monument. You know, part of it was intentional to put it in what was Boston's first Black neighborhood, Beacon Hill. You know, it was intentional to put it in a place right next to the Freedom Trail, so that you can't ignore you can't, when you're on those tours for the Freedom Trail, you cannot ignore the Black presence in Boston because it's right on that trail.
Beyond that, we all know that when people come to Boston, Black and white of all color, they don't actually visit real Boston, and that was touched upon in the film. It's like they go to the touristy spots. So to me, it was deeply important that it be somewhere that everyone visits, especially outsiders, because like you need to understand the history here, and also you need to have to engage beyond the kings who deserve all of the recognition in the world and often get it. Like the Freedom Plaza does a lot of important storytelling, and people need to engage with it, and it needs to be something that brings everyone around it. And we're not, I know John Borders is working really hard to get tourists into Roxbury and Dorchester and Mattapan, and I know he will. I believe in that, and I know all of us will, but until that time, it is very important that we take up space the way Hugh does in Copley, the way Nia does and Zazie Bar is doing in Seaport, and how the Embrace does in the Common. Like, it's incredibly important.
Yeah, it's important to meet people where they're at. But also it's like, the other piece of it is, yes, it is about connecting with people as they come to the city, but it's also like, that's yours too. You know, if you grew up in Dorchester, Roxbury, Mattapan, Hyde Park, Rosendale, you know, you kind of felt like there were certain places that you didn't necessarily either felt welcome or that weren't yours. And putting putting a memorial in on Boston Common, America's oldest public park, you know, that is a statement. There's a statement that the city is making, that this entire city belongs to you. You know what I mean? I think that that's something that more Bostonians need to engage in. So that's why
And
I'm
take that
super,
space. Go out your
Yeah.
neighborhood, because all of
Well,
this is yours beyond your neighborhood. Noah, jump in here, and then I only have one more question.
gotcha. What former Mayor Kim Janey said in the piece was the marketing materials. What do they look like, right? What represents Boston when it goes out to the masses and to the nation? It doesn't. I don't see Black folks on that marketing material,
now
right?
that's the case though, because they've
No,
actually
no,
gone
yes,
out with
because
it.
she
Yes,
did the
now.
whole, and she did the inclusion campaign, which was great as
Yeah.
well, of putting faces in different colors on the marketing material that this represents Boston, right? Signs that we saw growing up, as she mentioned, the Simcoe sign, right, on the in Mattapan, right? That is what we see I grew up. That was the big thing for me, seeing that. You don't see that on marketing materials. You don't see none of that is in our neighborhoods on anything that they promote. So having presence, taking up that space is very important.
On that note, I will it's very, one, that's very important, and two, I'm so happy that Janie and now Wu are very much pushing forward more representational images of us on that sphere, as well as embrace. And so, you know, I always ask people what their beautiful resistance is. So for my last question, I will say, what are you embracing as your beautiful resistance?
You go first, Greg.
Yeah, I'm still
Me before C.
I am embracing creativity. So on a personal level, like I am really making it a point to kind of dig into my own creativity, to you know, pick up a camera more, to kind of get back to my love of filmmaking, my desire to write more, and those are the things that are kind of helping to build me up as I kind of go out into the world. So those are the pieces that I'm embracing as part of my resistance. That's the way that I stay alive. That's the way I stay connected. Is connected with my friends to talk about new albums and things of that nature, and just really creating those spaces where we can have a genuine connection. That's really what I'm focused on for the remainder of this year and going forward, is how can I bring together all the really great people that I know so they can know each other. So that's what I'm embracing.
I think for myself, making sure your voice is heard. Especially as an artist, it's easy to stand behind your art and then let people say what they want and so forth. But really trying to find ways to get out there and have your voice heard as an artist, and the reasons why you make the choices that you make, and decide on the opportunities that you decide on, and then the follow up of talking about those things, right? Because I think the only way in which people can communicate and understand each other is having conversation. So being, intentional about that, and really trying to, get away from just hiding behind my art, and really trying to open up and embrace folks around me more.
A beautiful resistance indeed.
Mm.
Globe Docs family, thank you so much for being a community with us today. Welcoming the Embrace is phenomenal. Watch it. Also, go see it and participate in the movement beyond that. And just ask yourself, what are you embracing? Have you been held lately? Do you know what it means to exist in softness? Because we deserve that. All right, beautiful Black people. Thank you for being
All
here
right.
today.
Thank you, Janelle.
Greg and Noah, I appreciate your honesty, and of course it's hard for us to wrap it up on time.
We were
I
trying to
know.
keep it at a short amount of time. We could have went for another hour.
Oh, we could. We would have been. We need the director's cut. We need that hour.
Oh yeah, hour and a half. Yeah.
No, thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you.